Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Craig at Hiking Pipes. And today I am going to do a type of video that I haven't done in quite some time, and that's going to be a fountain pen video. I'm going to talk about something very specific about what goes wrong when you think you can do something, you can't do something, and how kind of bad accidents turn out to be pretty okay. Anyway, uh, I am smoking what I am dubbing my Sunday Kaviki. Uh, I've jumped on the proverbial bandwagon of, everybody has followed John Matches 860 with his Friday Savinelli, and I think people like to allocate a pipe to a particular day. So, yes, I jumped on that bandwagon, and I've shown this Kaviki before. It's my only Kaviki, but I kind of dubbed it the Sunday Kaviki. In it, I'm smoking Peterson's University Flake, which has kind of become a first thing in the morning blend for me. I enjoy it in the morning very much. It just seems to go well with coffee, and I have my coffee off to the side. So, as I said, I'm going to try to do a little bit of a very specific video about fountain pens. I've tried, this is going to be another take. I tried my first take and it was a disaster. I really admire pen reviewers and the way they're able to clearly show the pens and what's going on with them. So hopefully this will work out well. So the pens I'm going to talk, it's not so much the pens I'm talking about, but I have these two pens. These are essentially identical pens. They're both Pineider La Grande Bolezias. They're beautiful pens. They're two of my absolute favorite pens. They're not the cheapest kids on the block, but I really do love them. One is in a malachite green, and one is an iridite, kind of a burnt orange. These pens are, and I'll show this a little more clearly when I flip the camera around, but the material, it's a crushed marble resin. So it adds a little bit of weight and has a very solid feel to the pens. I'm just going to quickly put this one off to the side and do a 30-second preview of the pen. So this particular one has a really nice chatoyance to it. And again, we'll take a closer look at things. It has a magnetic cap and a 14-karat gold nib. And the nib is really going to be the subject of this video. We're going to talk about nibs and some things that go on and happenstance and what came of it. So I'm going to pause the video right here and flip the camera around, and we'll get into some things on the table over here on the desk. So stay tuned. Okay, so what I have here are the two pens, and they're laying on a pad of Tomare River 68 GSM paper. And what you may see in the video is this little nibby guy down here. So, again, that's going to be really the subject of the video. Just to show you a little bit more on the pen. So, these pens, like I had said, the resin is made out of a crushed marble. The clip on the pen, you can see, resembles a feather, and they kind of did that to resemble the old-time quills that were used when, really before the modern fountain pens came around. The clip is very, very secure, nice and springy, and you can hear that. The top finial is kind of a hammered metal with the name Pineider on it. The bottom is just a flat metal. The band is also hammered to match the top. It says Pineider on it. And around the back, although you can't really make it out very well, all those letters on there, it's the sentence, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." And I talked about this on a previous video, that sentence is used by fountain pen reviewers when they're writing, because it encompasses every letter of the alphabet. So when you're writing that sentence out, you're really showing all of the letters in the alphabet, and I will do that during this video as well. This particular pen is magnetic. It has a magnetic closure to it. It pulls apart, but the magnets are also has a single polarity. So when I twist it, you can see it kind of spring out a little bit, and it just slides right out versus trying to have to pull it and kind of, it just sort of abruptly pops out. And when I spin this around, get it to an orient, you could see how it springs back. So the polarity is just in one location. So pulling the cap off, put that down to the side. You'll see that there is an hourglass kind of metal grip. Initially, I didn't think it was going to be so comfortable, but it just, your fingers rest so comfortably on this. This pen itself is what they call a cartridge converter. So you fill up this cartridge with ink. You rotate this around, and you could suck ink right out of the bottle. So it's a cartridge converter. And the real star of this pen is the nib. Look how beautiful the engraving is on that nib. This is a 14 karat gold nib. And the real unique things about this nib is you could see right there, they have these side cutouts. And Pineider calls this a quill nib. And what those side cutouts are in there, and what it's designed to do, is add more bounce to the nib. So when you're writing along the paper, your pen is kind of gently bouncing along, and it's just a very super comfortable writing experience, and very smooth. And we'll talk about the line variation you get. Now, so we'll put this guy back together, keep it from drying out. Over to this nib. So I had gotten this green pen initially. This was my first one. The orange, burnt orange one was the second. Again, same exact characteristics. However, when I got this particular pen, it was in a fine nib. I tend to like to write in fine. And when I started to write with this, the nib was super, super wet. In fact, it laid down so much ink that it almost wrote like a broad nib, and I really didn't care for it very much. So, me being the mechanical guy that I am, I said, I watched a number of YouTube videos and how people modify their nibs, and so let me give it a shot. Well, this was the nib, again, that was on that green pen, and you can see I totally botched it. The tines are sprung. It's hammered unmercifully. I tried to squeeze the tines together. I even tried to grind a finer point on it, thinking that was going to make it write a little less wet. But because I am not a nibmeister, and there's a reason why nibmeisters do exist, and I found that out the hard way, is for very specific situations like this. Again, this is a 14 karat gold nib, and I just totally destroyed it. It's irrecoverable at this point. There's no nibmeister that could do anything to this, I believe. So I contacted Pineider, and I said, okay, I'm going to get a replacement nib. And they quoted me $175 just for this piece of metal here, because it is 14 karat gold and so forth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't really do that. So I ended up buying a new pen, this one here, and knowing my experience with the fine nib, this is actually an extra fine nib. So again, I'm much happier with this one, long story short. So going back over to this pen, being that I love the pen, but didn't want to spend $175 just for the nib, I did some research, and I came across the fact that there are titanium nibs out there. I didn't really want to put a steel nib onto this pen, but there are titanium nibs out there. So I found a titanium nib, and that's what this is. It's a Monteverde titanium nib. It came complete with the feed and the nib as one unit, and I was just able to pop the old nib out and with the feed and slip this one in, and this is a fine titanium nib. Now the real cool thing about titanium versus steel is titanium will flex a little bit more than steel, and that's kind of what I really wanted to get out of this. So with that, we will talk about how the writing experience is with these pens now in comparison. So we're going to pull this guy out of the way, and I will say that in this pen here, the iridite, I call it kind of a burnt orange. I have some diamine ancient copper, really good match for this pen. And in the green malachite, I have some Pelikan Edelstein Adventurine ink. So those are the two colors I have going on. And with that, we'll get into some of the experiences with writing with these two pens. So, starting with the extra fine quill nib. Let me move some stuff out of the way here. And like I had said, we'll start off with the obligatory sentence. So, writes beautifully. It's smooth, effortless, and just glides over the paper. So we're just going to cap this off for a second, and we're going to do the same thing with this nib. So you can see right off the bat, line variation is certainly different. I mean, this is an extra fine versus a fine, so the fine is definitely putting down more ink. It's a thicker line. So, but perfectly acceptable. I like writing with both of these. So the big thing is, what does the nibs bring to the table? So for this quill nib, as I said, it creates a bounce. It's not, some people like to say maybe it's a flex nib. This is not a flex nib. It's a bouncy nib. And what this will do, it will create some nice line variation. Again, you got something with virtually no pressure. Let me extend that down so it's readily visible. And then I could put a little bit of pressure on, and you can see that I can get some really good line variation. And there's no baby's bottom. There's no railroading or anything like that. When you're writing with this, and I don't know if it really picked it up, in this writing, but when you're writing with this, by natural, because it is so bouncy and so, flexy, you can get some easy line variation in your writing. Pardon my sloppiness. You know, and here, this was a great example right here. You could see how you're getting the nib, depending on how much pressure is being applied as you're just naturally writing, you're getting some, variation, especially right in there. So that's why this is such a joy to write with. Versus the titanium nib. Now, the titanium nib, again, you're getting a far more consistent line, all the time. It doesn't give you the same flexiness. I'm not going to continue writing, but it's just very consistent. However, if you really push the nib, like I did with the other one, you can see that with virtually no pressure, the titanium nib, I can also get some good line variation. But you have to be kind of concentrating when you're writing with the titanium nib, because it requires more pressure to be put down to get the line variation than just like naturally occurring with this nib. Again, far more flexier nib, with the quill nib. As far as the other parts of the experience, the titanium nib, and I have a lot of steel nib pens, but the titanium nib has an interesting characteristic that I haven't found on any other nibs, and that is how it feels on the paper. When I'm writing with this pen, sorry, I had my cap off too much. The best way to describe how it feels is like when you're writing with a dull graphite pencil. You're getting a kind of a feedback, and that's not a bad thing at all. Feedback is nice. It lets you know how the pen is moving across the paper. But this type of feedback is unique, and it's really hard to put into words sometimes. But again, this just feels like you're writing with a dull number 2 pencil. It's smooth, but yet it's just you have that feedback. That's the only word to put to it. Versus when you're writing with this particular nib, it's just gliding across the paper. There's virtually zero feedback you're getting, and I'm letting the pen just, without any pressure, this is how it's writing. So it's just a very, very smooth writing experience. And that's not to say one is better than the other. They're both wonderful writing experiences. So, and I enjoy using these equally. Like I said, they're my 2 favorite pens by far to write with. So, going back to this, number 1, don't try to modify expensive nibs on your own. Again, there's a reason why there's nibmeisters out there, and they have a skill set like nobody else that can modify nibs. If you want to try practicing and getting to the point where you feel like you can modify a nib, buy some cheap eBay pens. Believe it or not, you can get fountain pens for like $3 a piece, and go to town on them. But when you have a nib, just this piece of metal is going to cost you $175. Think twice about endeavoring onto a modification of a nib. So with that, I'm going to flip the camera around and do a final conclusion, and we'll go forward from there. So hold on just a moment. So I've appreciated you guys hanging through this whole thing. I haven't made too many fountain pen review videos, and as I said before, I really envy these pen reviewers that are able to do this more fluently. It's working around a tripod and trying to write and not make spelling mistakes as you're trying to talk and, you know, multitask essentially. I really give those fountain pen reviewers a lot of credit out there. There's some great ones. Like there's Fig Boot on pens. There's Doodlebud. Great video guy is Doodlebud. And like I said, Fig Boot is he's almost he's bordering into the authority line on fountain pens. He has so many fountain pen reviews up there. He's a good guy to watch. So, but I appreciate you guys sticking with me. So again, as I am a little bit redundant, this was to talk about when kind of a bad accident, or not even an accident, it was a bad on purpose in trying to modify that nib. When things go bad, there are resolutions, and I was able to fortunately find a real happy resolution to it. It did cost more money. Again, that's on me. It's like what I said in a previous pipe video. When you're trying to make a pipe your own and you're going to modify a pipe, go for it, but you assume the risks and the consequences if things don't always go the way you want them to go. You have to own it. And I owned it, and I still own it, and I had to pay for it. But again, the replacement nib with the titanium nib turned out to be a very, very pleasurable mistake. Expensive, but pleasurable. So with that, I'll just say to everybody, stay well, stay safe, be good to one another. And again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you again very soon. Bye-bye.